Um, good, good afternoon, Dr. Alexander. Are you listening? Oh, wait a minute. Iniciar a transmissão. Tá, isso vai ficar repetindo. Alexander, are you
Yes,
listening?
yes,
Oh,
I can hear you.
okay. So my name is Luis. I'm talking with you for the last months, and this is Sarah,
Hello.
or
Hello, Sarah.
Hi.
or another
Interpreter.
interpreter. So, uh, to align the technicals, and the transmission, the streaming, uh, I would like to. Oh, you shared with two lives. You, do you remember to mute the Portuguese transmission?
Yes, I already did that. Should be muted.
Okay, thank you. We turn on in 10 minutes, around 10 minutes, okay?
Okay, can you see my presentation at the moment?
Oh, yes, wait a minute.
No.
Mm,
Okay, right now, yes.
Right now, yes. So
Okay.
I
So
edit.
is it full screen now?
Yes.
It is.
Perfect. That works. So tell me, first of all, who are audience? Are they students?
Who are Jazz?
Okay, good.
Jazz is a student group of UFMG, University of Minas Gerais, and all members are students.
Okay, perfect. Good. Then I know how carefully I need to explain basic things. Like if I have students, I like to speak to students.
Yes.
Okay.
Not all students are in an advanced part of the course. There are some ones that are studying right now the veterinary medicine course. So the basic, concepts are good if you explain them.
Okay, perfect. So tell me how the presentation will start. Will you introduce me, or I will introduce myself by myself?
I will introduce you. A simple introduction. Only Aleksandr Semjonov, doctor in medical veterinary, PhD in the veterinary anesthesia, and only I pass the floor for you.
Okay, thank you. So Sarah, you will interpret, right?
Yes, I will translate half of the presentation, and then Luis will translate the rest. And we have a final part with questions where the students will ask questions for you. So Luis will read the questions in English, and I will translate your answers.
Okay, perfect. So should I speak slowly to give you a chance to interpret and to translate?
It would be good.
Okay,
Yes.
no problem. I will do that.
Thank you very much.
So am I right that we have more or less 1.5 hours for a presentation and maybe half an hour for questions, right?
Yeah, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Then, okay, good. Do you know how many people do we have tonight?
I don't know, maybe
For
20?
25.
25.
Is the confirmed number.
Yes, but probably we'll have more because it's the first international webinar that we're having, so
Okay.
probably 25.
Okay, good. So we'll start in 9 minutes, right?
What? I'm sorry?
Can you repeat?
We will start in 9 minutes now, right?
Yes.
All right.
Okay. All right. right.
I will just grab a glass of water.
Okay. Okay, we return. So we can start now. All right, all right, doctor.
Yes.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Luis Felipe, and I will be your host for the lecture today. This is Jea's first international lecture, and it was prepared with great care for all of you. We hope to enjoy it. Today, we have Dr. Aleksandr Semjonov, a DVM with a PhD in veterinary anesthesia, who will speak about anesthesia in in marine mammals. Alexander has extensive experience in zooanesthesia and wildlife, and currently serves as senior clinical and chief clinical director at the University of Life Science of Estonia. Please note that the lecture will be simultaneously translated from English to Portuguese. Once again, I hope you all enjoy. And now I pass the floor for Dr. Alexander.
Thank you so much, Luis. It's great pleasure for me to speak tonight to you. So, my name is Alex. Alexander. I can hear myself and at the moment. Yep. Yeah. Thank you. Sorry. So, my name is Alex, and as Luis said, I'm a senior anesthesiologist and the chief clinical officer. Sophia, I think you need to mute yourself because I can hear yourself translating, or you will do that simultaneously because
Yes, I
still
can.
can't speak.
I can hear. I can hear you. It's only a technical problem, but it's over now.
Work actually as a small animal anesthesiologist, but do lots of wildlife and zoo animals. So my main research animals and my main research species that I work on marine mammals, elephants, rhinos, and elephants. I, yes, I can hear you, and I think like it will be quite difficult to speak simultaneously at the same time. Or I will just give you time to translate. Yes, I mean, I muted myself in the Portuguese thing, but I can't. I can just switch off the Portuguese page. Let me check. No, I can't mute you. I can just mute myself here. Yes, so I'm at the moment I'm on the Portuguese. So now you are muted. So what about English one? Can you hear me?
Dr. Alexander, you
Yes.
need to turn off the audio of your Portuguese transmission. So you need to click with the right button of the mouse, and you will see the a line with
Okay. Mute
turn
sound.
off the
Okay,
sounds.
fine. That should be now good. Can you hear me now? In English version?
I'm listening.
Luis, can you hear me in English version now? Right, like unfortunately I can't hear you, but let's try to do the presentation. I hope that you can hear me at the moment, and I will switch the sound on afterwards. I'm sorry, tonight will be difficult to do that. I'm sorry, now I decided to switch on the presentation. Can you hear me? Can you see me? Can you see the presentation?
Dr. Aleksandr,
Yep.
are you listening? So you can continue the presentation and the symptom transmission. It's right. It's right. Okay.
But can you see the presentation?
No.
Sim, sim, sim.
Sim. Okay.
Can you see now the presentation? Yes, finally. So I hope that at the moment you can hear me, you can see me, and I can continue. So why we started to speak about marine mammal anesthesia generally? Because at the moment we have a big problem with the ocean conservancy, because we all know that living next to the ocean, the human being try to pollute that as much as possible. And the plastic pollution is the big problem that we deal with at the moment. And in different places in the world, in different oceans, from South America to South Africa, Australia, and Indonesia, we keep dealing with the same problem. So the plastic is everywhere. Animal can bite that, animal can swallow that, animal can be tracked and trapped by plastic. And the animals that are mostly affected in that are sea turtles, because, for example, in region of Arab Emirates in South Africa, we catch a lot of sea turtles that are full of plastics. Of course, they can die from the plastic pollution. We have lots of problems with the seals and sea lions that can be just trapped with the plastic bags around the flippers, around the neck, as you can see on the picture. Of course, all seabirds, because for them the plastic is attractive. They swallow that. Lots of fish, of course, whales and dolphins can also suffer from plastic pollution. So if we will check even post on social media or the news in a newspaper, we will see that actually another problem that requires anesthesia and that connected to ocean conservancy will be definitely some stranded dolphins, stranded seals, and for example, in Europe, in the area of United Kingdom, of Belgium, France, we have lots of dolphins that, for example, just don't know where to go, and they are lost. They go to rivers, to internal lakes, and they need to be catched, or and they need to be translocated back to their natural habitat. For example, just a year ago, we had the walrus just close to Finland. Actually, this walrus traveled a lot in the Nordic Sea, then came to the Baltic Sea, and was found in Finland. That is completely wrong place for them to live. And of course, in these cases, you have lots of social pressure and social attention to these animals. And of course, we as vets, we need to help them to get back to the natural conditions, natural habitats. So if we'll speak generally about marine mammal medicine, so I think from the whole veterinary world, it's one of the youngest branches of medicine at all. And we know that we have about 100 species of aquatic and marine mammals, divided for 4 big groups. We speak about pinnipeds, where we have seals, sea lions, and the biggest of pinnipeds is definitely walrus, that we will discuss just a little bit later. We have cetaceans, and cetaceans are quite big group of animals, really interesting: baleen, toothed whales, and of course, like a different species of dolphins. Sirenians as manatees and dugongs, that are again specific group of animals. And actually, as another marine mammals, we have sea otters and polar bears. Maybe not all of us consider polar bear as a marine mammal, but definitely they are, and we will discuss polar bears today as well. So what makes the marine mammal medicine so special? First of all, if you house marine mammals in your facility, it can be zoo, it can be aquaria, any water park, you always have the strong interest from the public. So once you start keeping a dolphin, you need to prove to all people around that it's actually absolutely necessary to have dolphin in captivity, because they're super intelligent animals. And of course, many people will have questions why to keep them in captivity. And that creates the unique problem for you. Anytime when you work on these animals, you definitely need to prove that you do everything correctly. Of course, you do, and you deal with the medical world, and you have all these medical challenges. First of all, you need to work in the water or close to the water, or in the specific temperatures. Just to give you an idea, that the walrus, even in captivity, should be kept in a temperature about 3 to 4 degrees centigrade. And even working in this condition for you as a vet will be quite difficult. They have specific physiology, and the most important from that is a diving reflex. And the first part of my lecture today will be the explanation of the diving reflex physiology for you guys, just to be on the same wave and to understand that correctly. Most of marine mammals, probably excluding the otters, are quite large, and that makes them strong, that makes them heavy. And anytime when we need to work with these animals, we definitely need to have a good plan how we'll manage so big animals under anesthesia. And of course, some of clinical procedures that can be quite routine for us in a small animal medicine or working with any other species or group of animals, like just venous access, the intubation, and the general monitoring. All of these things can be quite difficult in a case of marine mammals, and I will discuss that today, just to inform you about the clinical procedures as well. So let me start with the mammalian diving reflex. I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, heard about diving reflex, and maybe some of you listening us tonight are scuba divers, and you know about diving reflex by yourself from your hobby. So the diving reflex is actually, it's the physiological response, and that's the neurally mediated, and so it's autonomic. It doesn't need us to regulate the diving reflex, so it's just happens by itself. It's a response for all air breathing vertebrates to breath holding under the water. So to give you like a simplified version, if any of animal that used to live on the surface of the ground, on the open air, will get into the water, and if the nostrils of this animal will have a contact with the water, the diving reflex will generated by our nervous system by itself. So it doesn't need to be regulated by your wish or your consciousness. So what is the primary purpose of the diving reflex? Is just to conserve oxygen that is already in the body once you're diving. So if you will get to the water, once again, if your nostrils will touch the water and the small receptors in your nostril, that will definitely initiate the diving reflex. And we can observe diving reflex in many of marine mammals and many of aquatic animals. For example, dolphins, seals, otters, whales, muskrats, polar bears. But actually, these are just these species that we concentrate on. But you can also see that in swans, in penguins, and many other species of animals. And actually, it's encoded in the moment of the birth of many terrestrial animals. So it's not only typical for this group of animals that just I brought, it can be found in many other animals as well, including humans, so infants. Our babies, when they born, or on the moment of the giving birth or getting out from the mom body, also can dive, and they will get this physiological diving reflex as well. So remember, on the moment of giving birth, when the infant is isolated and separated from placenta, it gets through the birth pathways of the mom, and they need to get used to that. They need to be able to survive even this short period of time where they are without the oxygen. So they also have this mammalian diving reflex. But now you will ask me, what about adult people? Like, why we can't stay under the water for a long time? Well, unfortunately, we'll lose this option. And some scuba divers, they can develop this physiological response in the future during doing the scuba diving. But generally, all mammals and all adults just lose this reflex because we don't use that normally. So what is dilate reflex by itself? Like I mentioned a few times that it's a kind of physiological response, but how this response looks like. So we speak about the bradycardia, and that's the most important part of the dilate reflex. So bradycardia is the low heart rate. The animal will get peripheral vasoconstriction. So all blood vessels in the peripheral parts of the body will be constricted. So everything will move centrally. The whole blood will move centrally in the most important organs. The animal will get the splenic contraction. Remember, the spleen is quite big organ that works and that acts as the reservoir for the blood. And if the animal, for example, needs more blood that will be oxygenated, that will have more oxygen, the animal will get the splenic contraction and more blood will be released into blood vessels. And the animal will get the blood shift. So if you have the peripheral blood vessels that are constructed, so the blood needs to get somewhere. These animals, they have lots of anatomical changes and anatomical specific things that will actually allow to blood shift somewhere else from the periphery. So what these are anatomical adaptations that I just mentioned? In different animals and different marine mammals, we have different adaptations. So for example, the seals, they have extradural veins. So extradural vein is the big vein that's located just above the spinal cord. And that acts as a reservoir for the blood that will be shifted from periphery. So dolphins, for example, on the picture on the right, have a venous plexi around the head. So again, if we have the vasoconstriction, so all these peripheral blood vessels that will be closed, they need to shift this blood from the periphery somewhere. And in dolphins, for example, the whole of this blood will flow into the region of the head and will circulate around the head as long as animal is diving. Seals also have the interesting part of the vasculature called cable sphincter, and cable sphincter will protect the massive flow of the blood back to the heart, because we'll see today that the heart will pump really slowly. And during the diastole, we will have a prolonged time for heart to be filled by the blood. But in the same time, we have the really high pressure of the blood inside of the vessels, just because of contraction of the blood vessels. So the cable sphincter will protect the heart from overflow of the blood back to the heart. Pinnipeds, so seals, sea lions, walruses, they also have the elastic ascending aorta. So that, again, what means elastic? That the walls of that can be stretched quite severely and nicely. So aorta, as you remember, is the main vessel, the biggest artery in the bloodstream. So once we will have the peripheral vasoconstriction, the whole blood will flow in the bigger vessels, and because of this elastic aorta that can regulate the blood pressure to not have again like too high blood pressure in the central system. So it will be just compensating the peripheral vasoconstriction with the stretching of the walls. Now let's think about the physiology of the animal. Just would like to remind you what happened with the terrestrial animal, with all of us, with cats and dogs, with elephant and a rhino. if they do not breathe. To compensate that, the heart rate will go up to spread more blood that will be rich by hemoglobin, and hemoglobin is the structure that binds oxygen and transports that to peripheral tissues. So as during the diving reflex, marine mammals develop rather bradycardia than tachycardia, so low heart rate, rather the high heart rate, and that needs them to be adapted for not only storage oxygen, but actually also to slow releasing of oxygen from the molecules. So first of all marine mammals, they have larger blood volume, so it's 2 to 3 times higher than in terrestrial animals. And we already mentioned that the spleen is the organ that acts as the depot, as the storage of the blood. And once the animal dives, and once the animal is under the water, this animal needs more blood, so the spleen contracts and releases more blood that contains hemoglobin to be able to transport more oxygen. They have higher hematocrit. So if we speak about terrestrial animals, and the normal hematocrit is about like 35 to maybe 45 to 50, then in marine mammals, the hematocrit, so the percentage of all cells to the plasma, will be 50 to 68%, almost 70%. So they just have more cells that are able to transport oxygen inside of the body. And hemoglobin, the main transport protein that transports oxygen inside of the bloodstream, the level of that in marine mammals is really, really high. So it's we speak that it's 9.5 times higher than in terrestrial animals. So, but that's not only adaptations that these animals have. In mussels, we have another protein that we call myoglobin. So myoglobin also can storage the oxygen inside of the muscles, and that's why people that intensively do sports, they have the higher level of myoglobin, because muscles, also the consumption of oxygen in muscles, for example, during the active training, active exercise, active running, the myoglobin storage the oxygen not so sufficiently as a hemoglobin. So if hemoglobin can store 4 molecules of oxygen, myoglobin can store just 1, but everything depends on the number of myoglobin. So in marine mammals, in their muscles, the concentration and the storage of myoglobin is up to 7 times more than terrestrial animals have. But it's not only about the possibility to storage oxygen in the body. It's also important to not release this oxygen too quickly. So here we speak about the consumption of oxygen, so how much of that tissues actually need. So animals that can dive, all marine mammals, they are prone to hypometabolism. So their metabolic rate during the diving is really slow. They don't need extensive and high heart rate. They don't do physical exercises during the diving mostly. So the metabolic rate really slows down, and not so much energy will be spent on that. They all live in the sea that can be cold, and to protect themselves to extensive oxygen consumption, they can lower the temperature, and that's one of the adaptation that they have. They have physiological hypothermia. So just remember, the higher temperature the animal has, more oxygen it needs to normal physiology. Lower temperature the animal has, less oxygen we need. So the physiological hypothermia is again one of the physiological adaptation to this situation when animal just has no enough oxygen in the body, so diving. That's a bit interesting thing that actually, again, it's not only about the storage, it's also about the conservative use of intrinstic oxygen. So once again, the animal is not only storing the oxygen, they are really careful and shy to use this oxygen. So just to remind you the basic physiology, any animal can have the aerobic metabolism and anaerobic metabolism. What means aerobic metabolism? So the animal and the cell uses oxygen for normal metabolic activity. So for example, to create the glucose in the body, the animal, the cell will use the oxygen. So once we have a lack of oxygen, the organism will change to anaerobic metabolism. So the same thing will happen, the same physiological process will happen, but with lack of oxygen. What's the difference between aerobic and anaerobic, so with oxygen and without oxygen? We have important waste product. We call it lactate. And all you guys that go to gym, that do sport, you feel that in a couple of days after strong training, you have this unpleasant feeling in your muscle, or actually pain in your muscle, due to accumulation of lactic acid. So that's the product that created by our cells, by our body in anaerobic condition. So once the animal will consume the whole oxygen that was stored in the body, and it will reach aerobic dive limit. So for example, in the seals, it's about 18 minutes under the water. So the body will change to anaerobic metabolism. So it will increase the lactate in the blood. So now they are in the thing that as you do intensive training. So they will have the same thing under the water. So the higher concentration of the lactate that actually indicates that the storage of the oxygen is just empty now. So just remember your basic physiology. The heart rate is the number of contractions per minute, and the cardiac output is the amount of blood that the heart will pump out during the minute. So it can be influenced by blood flow distribution, but the oxygen uptake from the lung and the oxygen delivery to tissue. So that's why these two are important. What happens when an animal gets into the water? First of all, once the receptors of the nostrils will touch the water, the parasympathetic system will dramatically reduce the cardiac output. So it will reduce the heart rate and, of course, reduce the volume of blood that will be pumped by the heart to the body. Just to remind you that the parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous systems are part of autonomic nervous system that is involuntary system. And a sympathetic system, we call that as a positive one, it's the response for the stress, for the acute stress. We call that fight or flight. And parasympathetic is just actually the system that will try to bring everything down, like the heart rate, the transport of oxygen, and so on. So once again, once the animal dives, once the receptors nostrils will contact with the water, the heart rate will slow down dramatically. What I mean dramatically, if before it was 90, it can get to 15 or 20 beats per minute. And of course, slower heart rate we have, less blood the heart will pump into the body. But now we have the problem. So if the heart rate is so slow, then the body can't handle the blood pressure. So if the heart rate is low, the blood pressure will drop as well. And that can be fatal for kidneys, that can be fatal for the brain. So what happens as a response to low heart rate is the sympathetic stimulation. And it means that the blood vessels in periphery, in all these organs that are not really important for this animal to survive, I mean skin, muscles, organs that are not important, for example, gastrointestinal tract, this is not important during the diving. So the blood will get out from these organs and go centrally to the heart, to kidneys, to the brain. So we call that selective ischemia. So once the not so much important organs during the diving are not so well perfused during the diving. So first of all, heart rate goes down, and to compensate that, the vessels will contract to bring the blood pressure a little bit up. So because you remember that primer modulator of blood pressure is are vessels, so diameter of the vessels. Less the diameter of the vessels, higher pressures the animal has. Now let's think about diving and the composition of the ear. I think that in South America, many of you guys do scuba diving or it's just some training on diving, or you have the experience. And you remember that in atmospheric air, we have 21% of oxygen, less than 1% of carbon dioxide. So we don't need to breathe carbon dioxide. But what is the most important, that we have nitrogen inside of as a part of composition of the air. And nitrogen is the primer gas that we do not use normally for our body. And normally, nitrogen doesn't get into the blood because nitrogen can produce bubbles inside of the fluid, inside of our blood. What happens if we speak about terrestrial animals? So in one atmosphere, you remember that the air gets into the blood in the lungs, in alveoli of the lungs. So in a normal 1 atmosphere pressure, nitrogen can't pass the membrane between alveoli of the lung and the blood. And that's why we do not have any bubbles, air bubbles, inside of our bloodstream. So the nitrogen can't be solved inside of the liquid, so that's why it produces bubbles. But once we increase the pressure, we know that if we increase the pressure inside of the alveoli, inside of the air, that will push, the pressure will push the nitrogen actively through the membrane of alveoli, so between the alveoli and the bloodstream. So now inside of the blood, we could have the bubbles that can produce emboli, and that can lead to a death of the animal. That's why it's really important to not have any nitrogen, any air inside of the lung during the diving. So I will just remind you how you guys dive when you just go for swimming. You do full breath of your lungs, you close your mouth and you dive, you go to the water, right? I'm sure like you all do that. But imagine what will happen if you will be into the water, especially in the deep of the water. The whole water will press your rib, increase the pressure, and that will push nitrogen into your blood, and probably you will die in this case. That's why, for example, if you do scuba diving, they change the nitrogen in the air in balloons to the helium, just to not produce these bubbles in your blood. So, how marine mammals survive? They have a flexible rib cage, so it's very soft, and the water can easily squeeze that. And once they dive, the pressure squeezes the chest and squeezes the lungs. So under the water, if the lung is squeezed, the whole air gets to upper airway space. So it gets to the bronchi, it gets to the trachea, because we know that the trachea and bronchi are dead space. What means dead space? It means that there is no gaseous exchange between the air and the blood, because these organs, these pathways, they do not connected to small blood vessels. They don't have this membrane. So if the nitrogen doesn't get into the blood, so we know that nitrogen is a part of laughing gas as well. So, and it can produce the nitrogen narcosis. So if we have no exchange between the nitrogen and the blood, so we avoid this nitrogen narcosis effect. So, but some animals like penguins, sea lions, forest seals, they do just a short dive, and so they don't need to empty the lung. So what you need to understand now, and that will be important knowledge to understand, that if we dive with the full lung, then seals, whales, dolphins, they dive with empty lungs. Otherwise, they will have the nitrogen pushing into a bloodstream that is definitely not good and can lead to death of the animal. So, how they adapt once again to prolonged dive, especially whales. So if you will go to whale watching, and you will see how whales actually prepare themselves to the dive. So they do few deep breaths before they will go to the water. So once you have the whale on the surface, you will see that it will breathe in, breathe out, then breathe in again, breathe out, then they will go to the dive. And in some research papers, when researchers used some pinnipeds like seals and sea lions that were trained, and freely diving pinnipeds, and some dolphins as well, they got to know that their heart rate actually increases before the dive. What it means? They know that they're going to dive. They know that they will breathe deeply, and why the heart rate increases to compensate the phase of bradycardia. So first of all, the heart rate goes up to improve the transport of the oxygenated blood into tissues, and then once they dive, the heart rate goes down, but by this time you have lots of oxygen bind to hemoglobin and myoglobin into the tissue. So that's how it should work normally, but unfortunately, it doesn't work during the anesthesia. So this mechanism will switch them off. So animal can't increase the heart rate and can't prepare itself for the period of lack of oxygen. So what is important for anesthetist if you work with the marine mammals and you do anesthesia for marine mammals? Once again, remember, they have a large size, and for you, it will be quite difficult to handle these animals during anesthesia. They might get severely bradycardic. They will get the vasoconstriction, and you will have a problem to place the IV catheter. Because of soft chest, they will get a lung atelectasis. So the lung alveoli will collapse, and there will be no air and the blood gas exchange. And the animal, even if it has the air inside of the pathways, inside the trachea and bronchi, but there is no gas exchange because it's a dead space. You will need to think about temperature support because, once again, some of animals, for example, this walrus, it can or it should live in a low temperature that might be about just a 3-4 degrees centigrade. And remember about body position, because in any type of body position with that, because of the soft chest strip, the chest cage, that will collapse one or another lung. So you need to think how you will put the animal on the ground or on the table. And because of that, we all the time think and know that we need to provide positive pressure ventilation to push all alveoli up, otherwise they can die. So no positive pressure ventilation, no marine mammal anesthesia. And as you can see on the picture, the positive pressure ventilation can be actually applied by many ways. On the left, you can just have the breathing back of your anesthetic machine. On the right, you can have the equine ventilator that will ventilate the animal mechanically. Or in the middle, you have demand valve ventilator that actually is just a similar thing to leaf blower. And sea lion. They're not too big. I mean, males are about 2.5 meters, a bit more, and they can weigh about 250 to 400 kilos. So males are much bigger than females. And females normally are 2 meter long and 60 to 80 kilos. They might be about 90 as well, but they are not so big as males. So why we do anesthesias for these animals? Of course, we sometimes need to do this anesthesia just for general clinical examination. We do lots of anesthesia for ophthalmic procedures because they have lots of eye problems. But I think most of surgeries that we perform on the sea lions, on the Californian sea lions, are dental procedures because they have in captivity. They have lots of problems with their teeth. So I don't know, guys, like how important it is for you to understand the protocol, because there are lots of protocols available in the literature. So first of all, it's important to prevent vomiting because these animals, they're prone to vomit. And that's why I like to give them metoclopramide just 2 hours before I will start the medication. So if you need to just slightly sedate your sea lion, for example, for transport or for some minor medical procedure, you can give just a diazepam in a pill orally, and in most of cases, the animal will be sedated lightly, just enough to be transported, for example. If you need to have a deeper sedation, for example, to place the IV line, IV catheter, I would inject a combination of midazolam and butorphanol intramuscularly. It will be my protocol. You also can use alpha-2 agonist medetomidine that will produce and provide a quite good level of sedation, but that has a really strong effect to the heart. It's the really potent parasympathetic mimetic. So it will produce the severe bradycardia, so definitely not my choice. And just to give you an idea, once I use medetomidine, the heart rate dropped from 90 beats per minute to 12 beats per minute. And that's a bit scary for you as an anesthetist. So how to inject and where to inject? So on this picture, you can see that we prefer to use the hind part of the body, so muscle over the hips and tibia. You can use the lumbar muscles or the muscles of the shoulder. Neck is okay as well. We prefer to use the hand injection. Sometimes in aggressive animals, we need to dart, and the needles should be relatively long. So it's a 30-40 millimeters in a female and about 60 millimeters in the male. And I would like to show you this video here of darting.
Shoot on the shoulder.
So you see that actually I don't like it. So if you will go to literature, like lots of protocols described, I think zoletil-based protocols when you use tilitamine, zolazepam, but the most of problems that they have is apnea, and the saturation of the hemoglobin by oxygen is quite low, so it's less than 85%. That actually can be quite dangerous for the animal. With the increasing, with the adding of medetomidine to tilitamine, zolazepam, they achieved really good anesthesia, but because of severe bradycardia and the desaturation, like many mortalities reported. Alternative protocol that is used is ketamine medetomidine in a quite high dose, as you can see. So the anesthesia depth can be variable. So some animals will sleep deep, some of them not, but they all describe as severe bradycardia that can be actually life-threatening. And another protocol that they also published, medetomidine, midazolam, butorphanol, actually quite good protocol that also described apneustic breathing, but no actual apnea, but the heart rates were quite low, and the contractility in this protocol, contractility of the heart, is low as well. So what I do, I have actually different protocols for females and males. Females are a bit more easier, so we pre-med them with the metoclopramide, as I told you, just to prevent vomiting. And then I inject intramuscularly the combination of butorphanol, midazolam, ketamine. I know that many of my colleagues that use ketamine, they don't like it, reporting the cases of hyperthermia. But in many cases that I did, and that's quite a lot of cases, we didn't have any problem with the ketamine in this low dose of just 2 milligrams per kilogram. So in 15 minutes, you need to inject that and just leave the animal on, not disturbing. And about 15 to 20 animals. Animals won't be fully anesthetized in this combination. They be really nicely sedated. So when you have two options, you either, what I do, and you can see that in the lower picture, I will just give a mask induction with isoflurane, or if you will be able to place the IV catheter, then use them with the proper follow, and then intubate and you put them on the isoflurane, or you supply the isoflurane just with mask. Males are much bigger, so the handling of these animals just under butorphanol, midazolam is quite difficult. So what I usually do, I add a little bit of medetomidine. So it's a really, really low dose of medetomidine, and once I intubate them, I reverse medetomidine by acetaminophen. So I don't want animals to be under medetomidine during the procedure. Intubation is strongly recommended. So I would say that all animals that we put under anesthesia, they are intubated. So intubation is important to provide the oxygen, to maintain airways, to be able to ventilate, and of course, in a case of vomiting, for example, we can prevent the aspiration pneumonia. So the intubation is not difficult. So you just need someone that will hold the mouth open, mostly with an external recumbency, with the neck that is extended, and actually we create this slight opisthetonous position when we leave the upper jaw and leave the head, and we use like the cuff and the tracheal tubes again, like to prevent vomiting. Venous access actually is not too easy. They have, especially females. You can, if you need to just collect the blood, you can use the jugular vein under the ultrasound control. Or the other place that you can use is the epidural sinus for blood collection. For the IV catheters, we mostly use interdigital veins on the hind flippers. We'll show you pictures now. So that's the picture of the interdigital veins. You can see that they are located just between the digit. The puncture of that is not too easy, so we use worming. We use light to see the vein, and it's more or less easy in the big females, but it's quite difficult in males, unfortunately, especially because in males sometimes we still use peritomidine, and that produces the peripheral vasoconstriction. There is the nice paper published on the brachial vein in the sea lion, so it's also can be used for blood collection. So definitely the monitoring is one of the most important parts of any anesthesia. So we do pulse oximetry, capnography once the animal is intubated. I personally prefer side stream capnography, but at the picture you see the EMMA, the machine that actually detects CO2. The number by itself with EMMA is not really trustable, but at least you have a trend. And yeah, you have the ECG on the picture on the right, and you all the time compare the ECG and the heart rate on ECG with your auscultation of the heart. So what you can see here on this monitor, I think it might be even video. So you see quite high CO2, so about 80, and you see actually prolongation of PQ intervals. So when we measure it, we could say that that is first degree AV block, but because we can see that in all animals, I mean, in all Californian sea mammals, I think it's a kind of physiological thing. So you also can see the same on ECG. The PQ interval is rather long, but the interval is the same all the time. So I think that we can consider that as a first degree AV block, and still like the CO2 is quite of highish, 60 for you if you're habituated with the small animals. So here again, like CO2 is getting a little bit even higher, 70, and most of small animal vets will start worrying, but that's my record. It's an old record, previous one. I have a higher one now, so you can see the CO2. I just will remind that the normal CO2 in the blood is 35 to 45 millimeters mercury, but you can see that in many sea lions it can go really high without any problem, so they tolerate really high CO2. So 111 on this picture, the maximum that I got was 152 by this time, but it's only after the positive pressure ventilation, after the atelectasis of the lungs. So don't forget about temperature. They lose temperature quite quickly, so nowadays we more and more use the emergency blankets because they just store the temperature around the animals, so they are really good. Don't produce any burns of the flippers, so can be possible as well. So how to support them? Definitely remember that both hypothermia and hyperthermia are dangerous and can be associated with mortality. So we prefer to keep the temperature in between 35 and 38 degrees centigrade. The atropine is the drug that actually was previously has been recommended just before the procedure to prevent bradycardia. But remember that there are a few problems are associated with atropine. So first of all, medetomidine, if you use medetomidine, that will produce the vasoconstriction and reflex bradycardia. Although this mechanism is not 100% the same in marine mammals. So if you will give atropine to increase the heart rate, and at the same time you have the construction of the blood vessels, it means that your heart will pump against the wall, and that can be harmful for the heart. And if the heart is compromised, so it can lead to death of the animal. So at the moment, we know that use of atropine just routinely will increase the mortality, and we don't use that for premedication of marine mammals anymore. So again, the monitoring is essential. So we try to maintain the end-tidal CO2 between 30 and 70 millimeters mercury. If it goes up just with the spontaneous respiration, it mostly means that the animal is hypoventilated. If it goes down, it can lead to, or can tell you about atelectasis. So we prefer to ventilate them with the volume about 15 liters per kilogram. Remember, the chest is quite flexible, but do not overventilate them. So it's about 8 to 10 breaths per minute usually. And check the movement of the chest. So because the chest is flexible, you can see how deep and how much air you can inflate into that. Of course, you can sometimes you need to deal with emergencies, and if the animal, for example, will stop breathing, so will be in apnea, you need to start ventilation as soon as possible, and that's why it's important to have an animal intubated and the possibility to ventilate them. Really good indicator is the pupil. So if you will have the dilatation of pupils, so that's a bad sign. And now you need to proceed quite quickly and immediately. So rather abort the procedure, switch the gas, and administer reversals and ventilate them, because the dilation of pupils is the sign that the heart will stop quite soon, quite right now. For recovery, you place them in a calm place with the soft padding. We ventilate them mostly till they will start recovering, and you see that on the picture on the left that we use the ventilator and oxygen. On the picture on the right, the animal is intubated at least to maintain the airways open all the time for them. So the recovery can be quite rough, and they can develop actually some tremor. You will see that on this video. You see the extensive salivation. Let me play that once again. Okay, the video doesn't want to play properly, but you see extensive salivation, and the animal is really agitated and dysphoric. So how to understand that these animals feel the pain? I would
Lola.
just would like to show you a few,
Lola,
few
Lola.
videos.
Allez Lola, on se réveille chérie, on se réveille. Lola, Lola.
Probably you will
Allez,
understand
chérie.
that these animals, they don't feel well. And in this case, it's really important to start to treat the pain with the pain management. And the pain management depends on the exact cause of the pain. Is it neurological from the eye, for example, or it's dental pain? So you need to address all of this. So that was the story about the Californian sea lion. So now I will switch to the biggest pinniped, and one of the most challenging animals to anesthetize is a walrus. So first of all, walruses are huge, so they can be 500 to 1.5 ton the body weight, and of course, like you have lots of special consideration for handling, sedation, or anesthesia for these animals. So why we do this anesthesia? So most of them are because of tusks and injuries of tusks. So just to treat that, put crones, for example, on a tusk, as you can see on the picture on the right. But also we have some cases of emergencies, for example, dystocia, when they can't give birth properly. And of course, if you have the emergency procedure, then you can't be prepared for that, and the risk of mortality is really high in this case. So how we prepare the walrus for the anesthesia? So we fast them for at least 24 hours. We don't give any food because they're prone to regurgitation and actually passive reflux and vomiting. And we separate them to the dry area. So actually, that's a question that I get quite often. Do we work in the water? No, we don't do work in the water. We just separate them outside from the swimming pool, and you need to work in the temperature that will be preferable for the walrus. So it is the 4 to 8 degrees centigrade. Otherwise, if you will work in a warm condition, the consumption of oxygen will be much higher as well. And we mostly give injections by either hand injection or pulse syringe. So again, the protocols that we use mostly is the opioid imipridine and the midazolam, butorphanol midazolam, or butorphanol midazolam ketamine, and toll injection given by IM. On the picture, you can see injection site. So we prefer shoulder, sometimes neck. It might be paralumbar muscles, just in the hind part of the body. Sometimes, if they're really in emergency, we use tongue. And they have unbelievably fat layer, the thick fat layer. So you need to use the really long needles, so 8 to 10 centimeters long. It's important to leave the animal unattended in a dark place for the 20 minutes after you use sedatives. Let me try to play the video for you. So that's the video from the camera, and yeah, see that animal is falling asleep, although it's not fully asleep. And you don't need to disturb the animal. Otherwise, you will just excite them, and that will prolong your procedure of sedation. So the IV access for walrus is a bit easier than in case of Californian sea lion. So in the pictures, you can see that veins are visible. And again, like we use interdigital hind flipper veins for blood collection. Might be the large extradural intervertebral venous sinus can be used. So, but you need to have a really long needle for that. So once the catheter is placed, we use propofol. or combination of ketamine and propofol for induction. There are many reports of using tiritamine and zolazepam intravascularly, but also the same research paper also report a few of mortality case. If you have the smaller animals and younger animals, then you can use mass induction on the same way that we discussed in the case of Californian sea lions. So we can intubate them, and the intubation must be performed as soon as possible because these animals, they do not breathe spontaneously. They're too big for that. We keep the animal in the sun recumbency. We pre-oxygenate them. We use ropes to hold the mouth open, extend the neck, and pass the tube manually and blindly. So you just put your hand into the mouth and you guide yourself with the feeling of and palpation of larynx and vocal folds. Then we need to support these animals for sure, and we use the equine ventilators for them because they're too big for the small animal ventilators or the reserve back on the machine. So you can see that actually tidal volume is quite high. So if in most of terrestrial animals we use formula 8 to 12 milliliters per kilogram, then in case of walrus we use 15 to 20 to maintain the normal oxygenation of the blood and the normal ventilation, and the inspiratory pressure should be also quite high, so 30 to 35 centimeters of water. If you have experience in ventilating of small animals, where we say that 10 centimeters of water is dangerous and 20 can already produce the blood trauma, the pressure trauma of the lungs. So you see that these animals tolerate much higher pressures, and we ventilate them with the frequency just 4 to 6 breaths per minute. We maintain them on the isoflurane, doesn't matter like how long the procedure. And if we do any extraction of tusks, then definitely we need to think about analgesia, and we do local blocks for them. If the animal will feel the pain or actually nociception, so with the increasing of the heart rate, then we can add ketamine as the additional analgesia, or ketamine is anti-hyperalgesic. We know that the ketamine can produce the apnea, but anyway, the animal is on the ventilator. And of course, monitoring again, like unfortunately, in such a big animal, the monitoring is not so easy. So we can't auscultate them. We monitor the heart rate via ECG, and we expect the heart rate between 50 and 65 beats per minute. We do pulse oximetry, so we are successful to put the probe on the nasal septum and tongue and the flipper. Unfortunately, we can't do tongue often because the dental surgeons to work in the same area, and that will just be that will disturb them. The eyelid is also like a reported place of placement of the probe of pulse oximetry. And of course, once they're ventilated, we check the end-tidal CO2. Again, they can tolerate quite high numbers, up to 70 millimeters mercury, if they are in a constant ventilation, in the positive pressure ventilation. So even this big animal can get hypothermic. Just remember that you work in the cold conditions, so it's about 4 or 5 degrees around, and you can see on the picture that we use heating clamps for them and try to maintain the temperature in between 34.5 to 37.5. So not go to hypothermia, because remember, hypothermia will slow down the heart, and to not go to hyperthermia, because hyperthermia will increase the consumption of the oxygen for these animals. And recovery is really difficult. You need to still continue with the positive pressure ventilation. You stay with the animal till the animal will leave the head, and that's the moment when you will extubate them. If you will extubate them too early, that will be a problem, because the soft palate is really long, and if they are not fully awake, they can actually get into the trouble with the breathing, the spontaneous breathing. So stay with them, extubate once the head is up. And remember, nowadays more and more procedure can be done under medical training, and that's an amazing example of a really good connection between the walrus. His name is Garik, and his keeper. And for example, we managed to put crones to tasks without any sedation. So just a really good connection and trust between the keeper, amazing keeper, and the walrus. And the last animal that I would like to discuss today is a polar bear. As I told you, this is another marine mammal that we deal with time to time. They're big, they're highly intelligent, they're agile, and of course they can be dangerous, but still they're marine mammal. So males can be quite big, 350 to 600 kilos, even bigger. Females are half of their size, so 150 to 250 kilos. But because they are dangerous, just remember that the human safety is always priority in anesthesia of this big wild animal. And the safety, it's always covering the eyes with the blindfold. On this picture, you can see a net over the animal, just to prevent, if they will wake up suddenly, at least it will stay in the net for a few minutes. That will give you time, for example, top up the animal with your ketamine. So they are dangerous once again, and you need to monitor the anesthetic depth, because if the animal will suddenly wake up, and we have cases where the sudden waking reported, for example, xylazine ketamine, midatamidine ketamine, especially if you have a loud noise around, if you change the position of the head of the animal or the entire animal, if you have cubs that will vocalize next to the female, so everything that can wake the animal up. And of course, the pain is important thing that can lead to sudden awakening. That's why you need to use the local anesthetics for these animals for sure. In the, for example, dentistry and dental procedure. So, just why we consider polar bear as a marine mammals? Even the name says, the Latin name Ursus maritimus. It means a maritime bear. So they depend on the ocean, and the ocean is their habitat. They find the food from the ocean, and they are just unbelievably excellent swimmers. And they actually, some females were found about 3.5 kilometers from the nearest land or the piece of ice. They have webs between their forepaws, so they are designed for swimming, and they have a kind of moderate diving response, so they get this diving reflex. Maybe not so strong as in seals and whales, but still they can dive during anesthesia as well. And they also have a really unique thermoregulation, so they actually designed to survive in a cold. And if this thermoregulation is switched off by us, they get hyperthermic quite easily. So there are a few protocols described for polar bears. I think one of the most popular is the zoletil and midatamidine. The other one that I would recommend for animals that, for example, sick, is midazolam as a pre-medication, and I often give that orally. and followed by ketamine-medetomidine. Just remember, under just the ketamine-medetomidine, they can suddenly wake up. So I prefer to use benzodiazepine, midazolam with them. The new protocol that I prefer is BAM, butorphanol, azapram, medetomidine. Is a fixed dose combination and the concentrated drugs. So you use just 0.4 milliliters per 100 kilogram of the body weight of the animal. So that makes your dart volume really low. How to deliver drug to the polar bear? Just keep in mind that, especially in the winter time, they have lots of fat tissue, especially in the femoral region. So never dart them in the hind leg. Use either shoulder or triceps. Needle should be quite long. So it's 40 millimeters in the summertime and 60 millimeters in the winter time. Otherwise, they will just won't reach the good muscle. And you remember the drugs can be absorbed just from the muscle. Once the animal will get down, just remember to wait additionally 5 to 10 minutes to be sure that animal is sleeping before you will safely approach that. First of all, again, your safety is priority. So try to touch with the pole the nostrils, ear, and check the palpebral reflex. So once the animal has no reflexes, you can safely approach, and to maintain the respiration, the position on the sternum is best for them. So they will breathe much better. IV access can be done in different places. So metacarpal veins, it's a one. It can be used for even like a trained bears without anesthesia. But nowadays we more and more use jugular vein under the ultrasound guided approach. So you just visualize the vein, and under this supervision, you just place the IV catheter. That's quite easy. The guy in the picture is actually a human anesthesiologist that helps me a lot with my procedures. So monitoring, as always, as much as you can. Nowadays we have even blood pressure cuffs that are suitable for rhinos and hippos. So polar bear as well. You can see that polar bear has a cuff, and that shows the blood pressure. As I told you, they can dive, so the blood pressure can increase because of vasoconstriction, and the heart rate can go down quite suddenly. What complication we can expect from these animals? Of course, like they can stop breathing, they can develop hypoxia, especially if you use Zolitil for them. That's why it's important to have them intubated and supplement with oxygen all the time. And actually, polar bears have quite soft trachea, so it's important to keep the sternal recumbency and the neck extended all the time. As I told you, they have the unique thermoregulation. So you need to monitor the temperature of the polar bear all the time. And what is interesting, it will still rising all the time. So with all our drugs that we use in anesthesia, we actually switch the thermoregulation sensor off, and they will overheat even in the cold condition. So even if you do the anesthesia of polar bear in the north with the really low temperature and ambient temperature, it will still grow, and it can get to really dangerous levels, about 40, 41 degrees. In this case, you just need to recover the animal as quickly as possible. And for recovery, use oxygen support all the time to prevent hypoxia. You can recover them either laterally or sternally, but give them oxygen till the full recovery. Otherwise, the animal can get hypoxia quite quickly. So before I will finish, I really would like to thank my teams. because all this knowledge that we have, it's not just my knowledge. We work with the great teams around, and we do lots of procedures on the marine mammals. I'm really happy that I work in such a good team of people, and all the time say that teamwork makes the dream work. So thank you for attention, and now I'm looking forward for your question, but I will unmute first. Thank you. Any questions?
So, thank you for. Are you listening, Dr. Aleksandr?
Yes.
Okay. First of all, thank you for the lecture. It's amazing lecture, and I will love to increasement our knowledge about anesthesia of marine mammals. So yes, we have questions. So the first question is. Uh, does the change for anaerobic to metabolism to anaerobic metabolism happens to every aquatic animals?
The change of anaerobic to anaerobic actually happens in any animal, any species that that we have. So, for example, just remember, like who are prone to anaerobic metabolism are reptiles, especially those reptiles that live close to the water. For example, green iguana. They do not need much oxygen, or crocodile that live close to the water, and they change their anaerobic metabolism quite soon quite deep. So yes, like we actually can do, like, remember what is the good example of anaerobic metabolism? The animal is running, like it can be giraffe, elephant, rhino, tiger. If you run, you don't receive the oxygen into your muscle on some point, and that's why you have lactate. So you guys going to you do your exercises, you change to anaerobic. That's why I have lactate in our muscles. So all animals, all animals can develop the changing to anaerobic metabolism.
Okay, thank you for the answer. So we have another question. So wait a minute. If an animal was found in an emergency situation, like it was found in a beach, so the accept of lactic acid in the body would that indicates that indicates any risk for the animal?
Very good question. Thank you. Yes, it will produce the risk for the animal, because remember, lactate must be destroyed by the liver. If it's not destroyed by the liver, it will get out from the body through kidneys. So lactate and lactic acid in the massive condition can lead to death quite quickly. We actually, in the terrestrial animal, we call that capture myopathy. It produces the tubular necrosis in kidneys. But even if you have like just a high level of lactate and you need to get rid of that, so the liver should destroy the lactate. And if the liver is compromised, especially what is important for the liver, oxygen, right? So the hypoxia of hepatocytes is one of the major factors that will lead to a liver problem or liver damage, if not speaking about liver insufficiency. So the high level of lactate will get into the kidneys and can kill the kidneys. If it won't happen, it can lead to liver damage. Very good question. Thank you so much, guys, for organizing that. It was a really good opportunity for me to speak to you as well. You can see my email address and my Instagram on your screens. You're more than welcome to join on Instagram, because I do some educational posts quite time to time, just about wildlife anesthesia, or anesthesia generally. So you're more than welcome to spread that to your community if you're interested in that, and I will note my courses in anesthesia as well. Hopefully next year I will come to South America to present the course in Argentina as well. Yeah. Thank you. Cheers. Take care.